Hello and welcome to this edition of Türkiye Talks. As always, we are going to talk about international relations, recent developments in the world, especially the ones which are around Turkey, Europe, Middle East. So currently we have been talking about Ukrainian crisis, Russian invasion to Ukraine. It's now more than a month when first the war started. Russian invasion started. And last week we observed, we witnessed talks between Ukrainians and Russians in Istanbul. This was the fourth meeting of the sides. But this time, when we compare with the previous ones which took place in Belarus, the delegations made statements which looked more positive than the previous one. Now we are going to talk about this. As always, I'm joined by Kadir Üstün. Hello, Kadir.
Hi.
And Zuhal, Mert, Uzuner from Marmara University. Thank you for joining us. Maybe we can start with you, Zuhal, because you were in the Dolmabahce. You followed what was going on inside. I'll give you a few lines from Russians. They said the talks were constructive and the Ukrainian proposals will be presented to Putin, and also they would decrease the scale of their military operations in Kiev and Chernihiv. From Ukrainians, they said Russians were constructive and they believe that there can be meetings between leaders from now on. So what is your observation from yesterday, and how do you see these talks? Where are they moving?
Thank you for this opportunity to discuss again the very important topic for international peace and order. So we are observing very difficult days, and these days are the difficult just because the humanitarian reasons. Because as you know, that the more than 10 million people in Ukraine are displaced, and additionally approximately 7 million Ukrainians had to leave the country to the neighboring or the bordering countries. So this humanitarian atmosphere is must be the most important reason for the promotion of any probable settlement. Yesterday, we were waiting actually the results from the meetings, and everybody was expecting a kind of continuation, maybe more than 2 days, 1 day, or at least 2 days. Let's say the talks can continue. We were thinking, but what happened as a result? The only 1 day was considered as satisfactory for that moment, and the people, both sides, let's say the representatives of these two countries were positive, as you mentioned, but there was always, since the beginning, a kind of the limited positive atmosphere, and we can see the hesitations of these representatives, because it's very difficult topic, and the decision at the end must be taken by the politicians, because it's not easy to accept this political burden. It's not easy to accept some let's say limitations in the national the perception about this conflict. What was much more important yesterday in Dolmabahce, the Turkish efforts, since the beginning of this conflict, Turkey was trying to create a base, platform to make the let's say sides meet around the table. Turkey became successful about these efforts, and that was considered as very important contribution of Turkish diplomacy to this the neighboring the region, the people. So that's why the people were very happy, very positive and hopeful about the results. But of course, it's very difficult. At the end of this discussions, the table produced somehow the positive atmosphere, especially about the referendum alternative in the eastern part of Ukraine. You know, it was a topic in this between the sides. And also the other positive result of this discussions was let's say the Russian perspective. So Russians were somehow ready to decrease the number of the soldiers, especially in the western part of Ukraine. And we observed in the following day the withdrawal of the limited number of the Russian soldiers. But we started to see again something negative today. Maybe, I don't know, shall I continue to discuss today's developments and some...
Maybe we should keep talking about the talks which took place in Istanbul. We can move on to the developments in Ukraine in a few moments later. Kadir, what do you think about the talks? Russians are saying that Ukraine will be an impartial state. They will not be taking sides after these talks, and it will be also non-nuclear country. On the other hand, Ukrainians are talking about guarantor countries like United Nations Security Council members, Turkey, Germany, Canada, Poland, and Israel. So there are different proposals on the table. How do you see them? Which ones are realistic? Which can help a deal maybe in coming days?
Well, first of all, I think we should underline the fact that this is happening in Turkey through Turkey's mediation. From the beginning, Turkey, was able to talk to both sides, supported Ukraine in a significant way, but at the same time, it didn't impose sanctions against Russia while closing the Turkish straits. So it has had what we can call a balanced approach, and it aligned itself with NATO allies. It signed on to whatever NATO wanted to do. But at the same time, it has, since the very beginning, pushed for these talks to achieve a ceasefire first and then eventual agreement. Of course, we've discussed in previous episodes of this Türkiye talks that whether this was premature, there was maybe still a lot more fighting before the sides could kind of size up each other and decide whether they want to continue fighting. But I think the Ukrainian side especially is being clever by making concrete proposals relatively at an early stage. They have said they're ready to discuss neutrality. They would want certain security guarantees, like you said, and also they said that they would sort of try to resolve the Crimea issue through talks over the next 15 years, which means they're not going to accept Crimea's annexation, make it part of the deal, and then make it open to debate, which would mean if Russia agreed to that, Russia would basically be giving up in its annexation in some ways, or open it to negotiations going forward. So I think the sides are still far apart. There were some statements from Russia, seemingly conflicting ones. They said, nothing has been agreed, and Russia hasn't actually agreed to a specific item. They said the talks were largely constructive, and at this stage, realistically, I think that's what we can hope for. Of course, it's important that these negotiations continue, but I think, as I said, the Ukrainian side is showing the world that it is ready to negotiate, open to negotiations, but Russia may be unwilling to come to any kind of reasonable terms with the Ukrainians. There were talks, there was a phone call between Putin and Macron again yesterday. Apparently, Putin said, Ukrainians should simply surrender. The ones in Mariupol, as you know, Mariupol has been under Russian bombardment for a long time, and there's a huge humanitarian crisis there. So prospects of talks achieving an immediate sort of solution is not really very strong, but at the same time, it can achieve maybe confidence building measures and achieve small ceasefires to alleviate the humanitarian situation at this point. And I want to emphasize once again that it is significant that this is happening in Turkey, and Ukraine trusts Turkey to an extent to ask Turkey to be one of the guarantor states if there were an agreement in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, I think we should highlight Turkey's role a little more. The president at the opening remarks said the whole world is awaiting good news from you. We believe that there will be no loser in a fair peace deal. This is what he said. And, he received a standing ovation during his address. It was a very critical and historic moment, I believe. And also Turkey's communications president, Mr. Altun, he wrote a thread on his Twitter account, and he underlined, Turkey always seeks to provide a roadmap toward building a sustainable global system in the service of peace and stability. And at the end of this thread, I think this is important to underline. He said, Turkey has no illusions about the prospects about an easy solution. So Turkey is aware of this situation. Turkey is not playing a mediation role. Turkey, even the president said that, he said, we are here to facilitate the talks, which there is a difference. In mediation, sometimes you become a party in the talks, you make proposals, but here Turkey provides a safe and secure environment, which is also important because in these kinds of peace talks, negotiations, we know a lot of intelligence and other stuff is going on. So Turkey is providing a safe place, as Kadir mentioned. Ukrainians they trust Turkey. Russians trust Turkey. So Zuhal, you were there. So maybe we can highlight Turkey's role a little bit more before we move on the situation in Ukraine today.
Yes, Turkey tried really hard in this process. When you look at the atmosphere yesterday in Dolmabahce, two important, very let's say the well-known hotels were reserved for the representatives, and one of them, the Ukrainian the group, was in Shangri-La. It was just next to the prime ministry center in the middle of Beşiktaş, and on the other side of this the center there was another very important hotel, the Turan Palace. So they come there, and it was easy to follow the walking of the team, the groups on the streets. And actually, we witnessed some important points. Suddenly, we see the Ukrainian group outside of the building, and they come closer to the journalists. And of course, it created a kind of excitement at that moment for asking and understanding what's happening inside the building. And the Ukrainian representatives give a short, the explanation to the journalists. But as you mentioned, the President Erdogan underlines it that we are thinking strategically and in a realistic way. So it's not about being so, it's not a kind of euphoria. I mean, we are not giving so big, the importance to what's happening. But of course, we are hopeful to produce, to have a kind of progress towards maybe long ceasefire. And this is not something very, let's say, unimportant. It's very important, as you mentioned before, because there is a humanitarian crisis, and there must be a way to stop this conflict in order to find a way to help these people stay in the middle of this conflict. And also President Erdogan mentioned that there must be a way to stop this conflict by not let's say, giving harm to the both sides' position. There must be a way. So, for the Russian perspective, the honorable resolution can be possible. And you can see also the Russian position is very well understood by Turkish diplomats. When I look at the explanations, I can see that okay, there is a problem from the value-based perspective, but I mean, from the international law and the usage of the military the means is not so welcome in international law. But at the other side, on the other side, you have to bring the sides, even they are not totally, let's say, the legitimate. So Turkey managed this situation very well to bring sides together, at least to create a kind of ceasefire. That's why it was very, let's say, important. And when we were waiting outside of the building, there were many journalists from different countries, and I was listening a conversation between them. Most probably they were Dutch journalists, but I don't remember from which the channel they were. But they were talking about how President Erdogan puts his own let's say, prestige into this, let's say, the situation. And it was a risky choice, actually, for President Erdogan. If they say no, it could be also not so good. But what was the reason for doing that for Turkey? This is so important question, what I see in discussions of the journalists there. Yeah. So maybe I can summarize like this.
Yeah, Kadir, do you want to add something? As Zuhal mentioned, especially in the Western media, Turkey was praised during last maybe 7-8 years, we rarely see that Western media praising Turkey and Turkey's efforts for peace. How do you see that? Is there a change in the perception of Turkey after this crisis, not only Istanbul talks, but in general, Turkey's attitude? Because this is a result of years of balanced diplomacy, I believe.
Absolutely. Turkey is not a neutral bystander to this process. It has interests in the region. It has direct, strong relations with both Ukraine and Russia. And whatever is going to happen, it will impact Turkey's Black Sea security, security in the Balkans, even the dynamics in the Middle East. And these are all regions that directly impact Turkey. And I think in this crisis, we've seen multiple, world leaders visiting Turkey or contacting President Erdogan and, foreign minister and others, that there is a realization of how you can't really ignore Turkey and you shouldn't leave out Turkey, because Turkey is part of, not only because it's part of NATO, but it's a critical country in the middle of a region that has been, sort of destroyed by war and instability for a long time. And Europe largely ignored it or left they were happy as long as the humanitarian crises remained in Syria or remained in Turkey. They kind of looked at it as illegal migration issue. They kind of ignored the fact that, there are tectonic shifts in the region and it will not stay there. It will impact Europe. And we're seeing that, right? Russian activities from Libya to Syria to South Caucasus to Kazakhstan, now it's Ukraine. So I think there is a much better appreciation of Turkey's role and much better recognition that Europe needs to think more broadly about its security. That's why you're seeing, German Chancellor coming to Turkey, the Dutch Prime Minister and others, Macron talking directly to Erdogan, Boris Johnson as well. So I think in that sense, this is not just a show for Turkey. This is not simply, a matter of bringing sides together. Yes, that is true. Turkey is a facilitator, but I think it's become a bit more than that. It's also, there are aspects of mediation. Of course, like we said, there are broader strategic sort of considerations here. When is Putin willing to stop? What are the things that he's willing to give up? At this point, he hasn't indicated, he hasn't shown any indication of what exactly his goals are, right? There was an announcement just the other day about sort of reducing drastically the military activities around Kiev and Chernihiv, but today Pentagon was saying that they see it just as a redeployment, regrouping, and they don't see a serious effort at withdrawal. So, and we know from Syria and other places, Russia does use diplomatic talks as kind of a way of pausing for a bit, regrouping, etc. Is the same thing happening in this case? We don't know. We will have to wait and see. But as we said, Ukrainians have put up a serious fight, and they've shown they're not willing to give up easily, but they're also open to serious negotiations, good faith negotiations, because like indicating that they're open to discussing neutrality, I think it's very significant.
Yeah, I was going to ask this question to Zuhal as well. I studied Middle East, so Lebanon was one of the places that I read about a lot. And during the civil war, there were many ceasefires. Some lasted maybe for a few hours. So there is a saying during the civil war in Lebanon in 1970s. Okay, another ceasefire until the sides fill their guns. So are we witnessing a similar situation as Kadir explained? Now Russians are regrouping, maybe they are having a breath, trying to, resettle their logistical lines, maybe. And also, I should remind our viewers that Russian hybrid war tactic includes all of that. So you give a signal misleading your counterparty, and you do something else. So while talking to Ukrainians, do you think Russians has another plan of just, settling themselves, replanning their military goals, or do you think there will be a real solution? At least this can be a step to leader-level meetings. What is your take on when you look at what's happening today in the field?
What we may say, maybe as the first, let's say, as the starting point, the Ukrainian side, when they turn back, they started to judge the existing situation and what will be the next step of Russians. Shall we rely on the goodwill of Putin, because there's always the discussions about how to understand the real intention of Putin. Is it possible to understand him clearly? These kind of questions were so common in many, let's say, the discussions in TV shows and the columns today. And the Ukrainians have so many the worries actually about that. As you mentioned, Ukrainian side is so much sensitive about this issue. Is it a kind of tactical maneuver, or is it a kind of the maneuver which is referred as the decreasing number of Russian soldiers in the western side of Ukraine? So the most important problem here is this reliability and somehow trust each other, especially the Russia is somehow has such kind of image of this unreliable actor. This is the real problem, I think, in front of any kind of the progress in the discussions. And what may happen next? Now, you know, the Ukraine became a battlefield, and when I look at the other actors who are somehow a part of this fight in Ukraine, the Western Europeans, the United States, so there is still a kind of the nice words. You can find the nice words and the stories of bravery of the Ukrainians. There's a kind of promotion of this nice defense of Ukraine against Russian aggression. So that's why I'm not sure about the let's say the speed of any kind of, let's say, ceasefire or a settlement. There may be some problems because of this trust issue. We observe it from the Greek-Turkish relations many times. What is the main problem is this lack of trust. So how to progress? There must be a level of trust in order to progress in any kind of negotiation, and we don't see that at all. And also, we are talking about the intention of Russian side, but also we have to talk about Ukrainian side too. At the end, any kind of negotiation at that moment needs serious concessions for the both sides. Russia shall leave some parts of, let's say, or let's say Putin's first projection at the beginning of this fight, maybe, or from the perspective of Ukrainians' territorial integrity at the table, Crimean, let's say, the peninsula and the eastern part of Ukraine is at the table. And despite they are talking about referenda, how much it is acceptable for a leader at that moment, because when you look at the groups came to this, let's say, the discussions in Dolmabahce, the Ukrainian side had this green T-shirts, you know, the symbol of the warriors. So they are like they are coming from the field, the battlefield. So there's still the high level of motivation in Ukrainian side too, and there are some arguments about their intentions, like they are trying to show how much they are willing to find a solution. But as you can see, Ukrainians, the Russians are not ready. Whatever they do, there won't be any kind of resolution. So the Western Europeans and United States and NATO shall give an urgent support, higher, much more serious support to Ukrainians. So is it a kind of show off in front of the cameras, or what will be the result? It's a really big question. As I mentioned, the Cypriot, let's say, the negotiations is another example. Everybody loves so much peace and, let's say, the resolution when you look at the explanations in front of cameras. But later you can see when they turn back, the story can change very easily. This is the main problem, I think. We cannot answer simply that this is a kind of, let's say, the tactical maneuver or a really good intention of the both sides. Maybe a combination of both of them.
Yeah, we'll see that. Maybe we should talk a little bit more on European stand on this. Also the parties. This is interesting, what I'm trying to talk about. Russia doesn't oppose Ukrainian EU membership according to the news reports. during this Istanbul talks. This is one of the outcomes. And Ukrainians wanted that. They said there should be no condition that Ukrainians cannot join EU. So it seems that for Russians, EU is not a big deal. They don't see it as a challenger, or maybe they know how to handle EU. They know the differences, so they can use one against another. But when it comes to NATO and security guarantees, it's changing. So, Kadir, how do you see this EU attitude of both sides, and also Russian expectations that they will join military exercises maybe in the future with Russia? So, do you think they are trying to create another Belarus next to Russia? What is the idea behind all that?
Well, probably a country like Belarus would have been acceptable for Putin, but that's not going to happen. That's clear. But I think if you remember the beginning of the conflict, Russia never demanded that Ukraine doesn't enter the EU, and if it's going to be kind of if Putin is able to influence some groups, especially in Donbass and Crimea, right, and if he can use them to exert some influence over the rest of the country, a country like that being part of the EU is not necessarily an anti-Russia thing. Maybe that's what the calculation might be. But I want to be careful again, like Russia has not agreed to anything like this. These are kind of press reports. We don't know the ultimate goal of Putin. And as you know, from other Russian negotiation tactics, we won't know until they announce something officially and then they sign it, right? So I think we are still at the early stages of these negotiations. But in the Ukrainian proposal, right, they talk about security guarantees from countries like Poland and Turkey and Israel. Israel is not a NATO country, but Poland and Turkey are. So if there is an attack on Ukraine in that scenario in the future, two NATO countries coming to Ukraine's aid will mean that NATO comes to their aid. So I'm not sure if Russia will, say yes to this proposal at all. I highly doubt it. But of course, I think Russia would have to commit to security guarantees for Ukraine as well, if Ukraine is going to accept neutrality. Otherwise, it's meaningless. You announce that you're going to be neutral. You won't seek membership in NATO, but you'll have no protection. So that wouldn't make sense. But as I said at the beginning, I think Ukrainians are playing a smart diplomatic game by showing some of their cards, showing the world that they are open to negotiations, serious negotiations. They're showing the Russians that they are serious about the negotiations. But since we don't know the ultimate goal of Putin, if the ultimate goal is essentially take over the country or take over Kiev and install a pro-Russian government and can't work with Zelensky, then, all this might be tactical, like Zuhal, Professor Zuhal mentioned. So we need more time, and in the meantime, the conflict continues. We have to be mindful of that. There hasn't been a major withdrawal or major announcement for withdrawal. There are many cities right now under Russian fire, and Ukrainians are fighting back, and they were actually able to even make some counteroffensives and take over some small cities back from the Russians. So that's promising for the Ukrainian side. So for the Europeans, I think they also would like a rather quick resolution to this conflict because they are under pressure in terms of their energy relationships with Russia. By the way, I should mention, I was just looking at the numbers. Russia's oil exports have gone down drastically. They used to export something like 4 million barrels a day, and numbers are showing that's about 2 million barrels, and that could go down to 1 million barrel next week. So that's a significant loss for Russia. But at the same time, the pressure on the Europeans to cut the natural gas is also increasing. The United States promised some liquefied gas, LNG, to Europeans, but that cannot easily replace the Russian natural gas anytime soon. It will take probably months. So while Ukrainians are interested in negotiations seriously, and Russians are, let's say, interested enough to send their, negotiation team to Turkey, and now Europeans have an significant stake on this. I want to be more hopeful, but again, the caveats are there, right? The fighting has not really stopped in any meaningful way. There hasn't been many humanitarian corridors opened in a serious way, and Russian negotiation tactics we know from other places. So I don't know, like on the balance, these negotiations are definitely very important, and they need to continue. They must continue, and I think they shouldn't lose steam. You'll see Turkey trying to bring sides together again very soon. But again, like those Russian concessions, I'm not clear what they're willing to concede at this point.
Yeah. Before we close, I'd like to, continue from this point. Especially in the Western media, there is a tendency that, Turkey is using this Ukrainian crisis, this war, as an opportunity. For example, foreign policy. Ukraine's war is Erdogan's opportunity, he wrote, a journalist. One says, a Russian writing for a Jewish network, a Russian political commentator, the fighting in Ukraine is a gold mine for Turkey, especially referring to President Erdogan. And that kind of headlines and opinions I see a lot. But I think Turkey's efforts are genuine, and Turkey's search for stability and peace in the region is not just showing, making statements, because Turkey has real concerns and real interests in ending this war. This is my opinion. What do you want to say very briefly, Zuhal?
I agree with you because I remember when you are listening to you, the Idlib and the Syria case, Turkey tried to explain very hard to explain that this is a humanitarian matter. There must be a help and there must be support to this region. But as you know, there is a blind point in the Western point of view, especially about the Erdogan. It's not about Erdogan. Everything is not about Erdogan, but I should underline that this blind point makes sometimes create sometimes difficult the directions for the strategic calculations. When we look at the Turkey's standpoint, Turkey was right, and it's not only about Erdogan. We need to underline that this is Turkish diplomacy and the Turkish state's diplomacy. And when I'm looking at all these happenings, the Turkish standpoint, Turkish perception of what's happening around it, is really coming from the Turkish foreign policy traditions, and it's old. It's much older than the contemporary government or the leadership. And we need to underline that Turkey is a rational actor and has a state tradition, has a very strong diplomatic tradition, and we are able to read what's happening around. And Turkey knows that there must be a realistic perspective to solve the problem. Otherwise, it will create another fire, and this fire will burn other neighboring regions. And this is very successful, let's say, the perspective. And I think that there is no need to discuss that there is opportunism or other things. No. At the end, if it's only related with Turkey's opportunism or leaders, let's say, the opportunism, what about the response of the sides? Why Ukrainians receive that, accept that, or the Russians are accepting this? Because at the end, they are conflicting sides. That means there is a credibility of Turkey. So the Turkey is a reliable actor. Turkey is in a goodwill, trying to find a base for bringing sides. And also, I need to underline this point of being facilitator. Turkey is very sensitive, and I hear this many times from high representatives of Turkey. Being a facilitator means Turkey is not pushing sides towards one direction to accept one type of solution. We bring sides to find their own solution. So this is also very important and very much connected with traditional foreign policy standpoint. And also the references to international law, UN system, international order, everything is related with this traditional background of Turkish foreign policy. So I think there is a kind of blind point just because of this ideological perspective.
May I just add something, Bora?
Yeah, I'll give you, but we should underline, although the negative attitude of the West, President Erdogan's impact was very positive, as always, as the leader of Turkish diplomacy. He is a very experienced diplomat. He joined many summits. He organized many mediation talks here. So it should be understood as well. Yes, Kadir.
Well, I think one of the common ongoing old mistakes when these analyses are made about Turkey is there is never a proper appreciation and assessment of Turkish national security interests themselves. Turkey has an interest in doing this. These are real security and economic interests. Ukraine is sends about 2 million tourists every year to Turkey. Russia sends 5 million. Turkey trades with these countries in significant ways. Russia is one of the top trading partners for Turkey. Turkey has defense relationship with both countries. And the changing of status quo in the Black Sea will have implications for Turkey as well as NATO. So Turkey is not saying, like, as I said earlier, it's not like two countries got into a fight and Turkey is jumping at the opportunity to mediate. No, Turkey has serious concerns and serious direct impact that it can experience from this conflict. It already has. Turkey already accepted more than 50,000. I don't know the latest number, but more than 50,000 Ukrainian refugees on top of the 5 million it already has in the country. So I think when we're talking about Turkey finding this an opportune moment to score diplomatic scores, that is probably just a symptom and just a surface of Turkey's approach. Turkey has serious concerns, and prolonging of this conflict will have detrimental effects on Turkish national interests.
Yeah. Okay, with this, let's end this conversation. Thank you very much, Kadir and Zuhal. With this, we came to the end of this program. Türkiye Talks will be with a new show. We will see you again next week. So thank you very much.
Thank you both.